Stop everything you're doing right now. Because what I'm about to expose to you over the next several minutes is going to make your stomach turn, your jaw drop, and your blood absolutely boil. A young woman is dead. Her body has barely been lowered into the earth. The dirt on her grave hasn't even settled. And while her mother is still wiping tears off her face, while her father is still trying to figure out how to breathe again, while her friends are still posting tribute after tribute trying to keep her memory alive, the man who was supposed to spend the rest of his life with her, the man who put ring on her finger on the very trip she never came home from, is sitting somewhere in this world right now spinning a brand new fairy tale about himself. And he's not just doing it on his own Instagram. He's not whispering it to a friend. He has hired a publicist. He has hired a lawyer. He has paid one of the biggest tabloids on the planet. And he is launching what I can only describe as a full-scale, fully funded, fully calculated reputation rescue mission. While she is in the dirt, less than 2 days after her funeral. 2 days. And if that doesn't disturb something deep inside of you, I don't know what will. So buckle in. Lock your door. Put your phone on silent. Because by the time this video is over, you will see exactly how this game is played, exactly who is playing it, and exactly why the family of Ashley Jana is being silenced while the man with the most questions to answer is being repackaged and rebranded as the real victim of this entire tragedy. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is the voice you can trust to slow down, zoom in, and rip apart every single line, every single comma, every single carefully chosen word in the stories the mainstream media drops on your timeline. Because nothing, and I mean nothing, is ever an accident when a millionaire is involved. Nothing is ever a coincidence when a publicist is in the room. And this story, the story of Ashley Jana and her fiance Joe McCann, is dripping with red flags from the first sentence to the last. Let me set the stage for anybody who is just walking into this saga for the very first time. Ashley Jana, a beloved influencer, a beautiful young woman with a heart the size of a continent, traveled to Tanzania with her fiance, a crypto investor named Joe McCann. He proposed to her on that trip. The pictures were everywhere. The internet celebrated. People were sending love. People were dreaming about the wedding. And then, like a switch flipped on the universe, she was gone. Just like that. On a foreign continent. In a hotel room, she was sharing with the man who claimed to love her more than anything in this world. Local authorities initially classified her passing as a self-inflicted incident. The internet erupted. Family members rejected the classification. Friends rejected the classification. People who had known her for years, people who had spoken to her hours before the tragedy, said the same thing in unison. This does not match the woman we knew. The Tanzanian authorities then questioned Joe. They held his passport. They opened an investigation. He was never arrested. He was never charged. He was never publicly labeled a suspect. And then, slowly, the way these stories always go when wealth is involved, things started to quiet down. The cameras drifted. The trending hashtags fell off the front page. And right when the silence was heaviest, right when the algorithm had moved on, right on cue, the machine started moving. First came the letter. Joe McCann, the same man who had said almost nothing publicly for nearly 3 weeks, suddenly released a long, polished, perfectly worded love letter on the very day Ashley was being laid to rest. Think about that timing. Think about that timing. Not the day after she passed. Not the week after. Not when her family was begging for comfort. No, the day of her funeral. The day her mother was watching her only daughter being buried. That's when he chose to break his silence. That's when his words were ready to fly. And anyone with even a basic understanding of crisis management saw exactly what was happening. That letter was not grief. That letter was a press release dressed in black. And then, before the family could even take their funeral clothes off, before the flowers had even started to wilt on her grave, the second wave hit. TMZ dropped an article. And not just any article. An article so transparent, so packed with PR-coded language, so stuffed with anonymous sources, so allergic to actual evidence, that you can practically smell the publicist's cologne coming off the page. Let me walk you through it. Sentence by sentence. Because this is where the real masterclass happens, and this is where you, the viewer, are going to learn how to spot a planted story from a mile away for the rest of your life. The headline reads, in essence, that influencer Ashley Jana's fiancé is now being targeted with racist taunts and online threats following her passing. Now, Before we even get to the body of the article, look at that headline. Look at who it centers. Look at who is now positioned as the wounded party. Not the dead woman. Not the grieving mother. Not the silenced father. Joe. The fiance. The man who came home from the trip. The man who is still breathing. He's the headline. He's the focus. The dead woman is reduced to a possessive noun, a footnote in the story of his suffering. That alone should tell you everything about who paid for that article and why. Because legitimate journalism leads with the missing piece. PR leads with the redemption arc. And this, my friends, is a redemption arc disguised as reporting. Now let's look at the very first phrase in the body. TMZ has learned. 3 little words. Looks innocent. Sounds normal. But pay attention. TMZ has learned is the laziest, most overused, most slippery phrase in the entire tabloid playbook. It is what you write when you have no source you can name, no document you can cite, no quote you can defend. It is the journalistic equivalent of a magician saying, "Trust me, look over there." Real reporting names its sources. Real reporting points to public records. Real reporting backs up its claims. TMZ has learned is the smoke. The fire is in the boardroom of whoever called them up and offered the exclusive. The article then continues with the now famous phrase, repeated again and again, like a hypnotic chant. Sources close to Joe. Now I want you to stop and ask yourself a question that nobody seems to be asking out loud. Who exactly is a source close to Joe? Is it his mother? Name her. Is it his brother? Name him. Is it a childhood friend? Where's the friend? Is it a co-worker from the crypto world? Where's the firm? Is it his ex-wife? Is it his children? Is it his neighbor? Is it the doorman at his building? Because here's the thing. In legitimate journalism, sources are usually anonymous because they fear retaliation, not because they are the same person who paid for the article to be published. When a publicist feeds a tabloid a story, the publicist becomes the source close to the client. That is not a leak. That is a deposit. And every single time you see that phrase repeated in this article, and you will see it again and again and again, what you are actually reading is one person. One person speaking on behalf of Joe. One mouthpiece pretending to be a chorus. One paid hand pretending to be a community of concerned insiders. Let's keep moving. The article tells us that ever since Ashley's passing while on a trip in Tanzania in March, Joe and his family have been bombarded with an overwhelming number of threats and hateful messages. Now, let's pause here because this needs to be said clearly. From the very second this story broke, who was being attacked online? Who was being dissected? Who was having her old social media posts dragged into the daylight and held up for public ridicule? It was Ashley. It was the dead woman. It was the victim. The world spent the first 2 weeks talking about Ashley's preferences, Ashley's old tweets, Ashley's videos, Ashley's love life, Ashley's choices. I have watched this story from day one, and I want to say this on the record because it matters. I have not seen, not once, a single coordinated wave of attacks aimed at Joe McCann for being a white man in a relationship with a black woman. Not one. I have seen people demand answers. I have seen people raise valid questions. I have seen people demand justice. But coordinated racist attacks on him, conveniently surfaced now, on the heels of her funeral, when his name needs softening, when sympathy needs to be redirected. Come on, pull the other one. But it gets worse. Because the article then drops one of the most surgically crafted lines I have ever read in a tabloid piece. We're told the situation is particularly hard on Joe because the insinuation that he had anything to do with her passing hurts him deeply. Read that line out loud. Slower this time. Notice what is happening. Notice the architecture of the sentence. The pain is not for Ashley. The pain is for himself. The pain is not for the woman who is no longer breathing. The pain is for his reputation. And that is the entire thesis of the article in a single line. He is not hurting because she is gone. He is hurting because people think he might have had something to do with her being gone. Those are two completely different forms of grief, and only one of them is actually grief. The other is panic. Let's keep peeling. The article goes on to insist, through yet another anonymous source, that Joe truly loved Ashley and would never hurt her. Fine. Take it at face value if you want. But then comes the line that exposes the entire game. The line that, the moment I read it, made me push back from my desk and say out loud, "Oh, this is a campaign." The line reads, "He would never hurt her, or any other woman, for that matter." Stop. Hold the phone. Why is any other woman in this sentence? Why is there a defense being raised against an accusation that has not been made? Why is the article preemptively inoculating Joe against allegations from women who are not Ashley? Anonymous sources do not speak like this. Friends grieving over the loss of a loved one's partner do not speak like this. Family members do not speak like this. You know who speaks like this? Lawyers, publicists, crisis managers, people who have been trained to plant defensive armor in advance of a future attack. That single phrase, or any other woman, is not a slip. It is a shield being lifted into place because somebody on his team is anticipating the next wave of questions and getting ahead of it on his behalf. That is not journalism. That is legal strategy whispered into the ear of a tabloid editor. And then the article keeps going. It tells us Joe has been more than happy to cooperate with authorities. More than happy. Read that one again. More than happy. The man's fiance was just declared deceased on a foreign continent under circumstances that the entire internet is questioning, and the language being chosen to describe his cooperation is more than happy? Who, in their right mind, in their darkest hour of grief, is more than happy to do anything? That is not the language of a heartbroken man. That is the language of a press representative trying to paint a picture. And the picture being painted is of a calm, helpful, agreeable man who could not possibly be hiding anything because he is so very cooperative. It's manipulation. It's word selection at its most cynical. Let me give you the timeline of how cooperative this so-called grieving fiancé actually was. Ashley's family was not informed by Joe. They were informed by the hospital. Read that sentence again. The man who proposed to her. The man who shared a hotel room with her. The man who was apparently the last person to see her alive did not pick up the phone and call the woman's mother. The hospital had to do it. And then, hours later, when there was a critical update, the hospital had to call back again because Joe still wasn't in contact the way a fiancé would be. This is a man whose first instinct in the worst hours of his future wife's life was apparently silence. And now, weeks later, an article appears bragging about his enthusiastic cooperation with authorities. It does not add up. It cannot add up. It will never add up. The article then pivots and introduces the racism angle on a much heavier scale. It says Joe has experienced a wave of comments attacking him because he and Ashley were in an interracial relationship, and that these comments are pushing the narrative of a well-off white man harming his black fiancée. And here is where it gets complicated, because there is a tiny little kernel of truth buried inside a mountain of manipulation. Are there people online speculating about that exact narrative? Yes. Are there comments being made? Yes. But here is what the article will not tell you. He brought the narrative on himself. The man whose fiancée was lying in a hospital bed in another country was, according to multiple online observers, updating his profile pictures, reorganizing his digital footprint, and behaving in ways that are absolutely not consistent with a man whose entire universe just collapsed. That is the soil in which suspicion grows. People did not invent that suspicion in a vacuum. They watched his behavior. They watched the silence. They watched the timeline. And they drew their own conclusions. And now, instead of addressing the actual concerns, the article tries to shrink-wrap all of those legitimate questions into the single word racism so that they can be dismissed and discarded. Now let me make something else absolutely clear, because this matters. Joe is not currently charged with anything. He is not currently arrested. He is not currently labeled a suspect by Tanzanian authorities. From everything we have been told, he has been treated as a witness in this investigation. So I am not standing here saying he is guilty. I am not the judge. I am not the jury. I am a person who pays attention. And what I am saying is that the behavior we are watching, the timing we are watching, the language we are watching, all of it deserves the public's eyes. Not the public's pity. Their eyes. Let's get to another massive red flag. The article casually mentions that local police initially believed it was a self-inflicted incident and have not announced anything to the contrary. Read that line very slowly. Have not announced anything. To the contrary. We are now nearly 30 days into this investigation. The autopsy has been done. The passport was held. Witnesses were interviewed. And in all of that time, the official classification has not changed. Not a single press conference. Not a single update. Not a single public adjustment of the original finding. And while you sit there waiting for an update, the man at the center of the storm is somewhere far away from prison cells, far away from courtrooms, suddenly very interested in talking to TMZ. Tell me what that pattern looks like to you. Because to me, it looks like a clock running out. It looks like someone watching the calendar. It looks like a window of opportunity being seized while the official paperwork sits frozen in a foreign filing cabinet. The article then mentions that Ashley's family decided to prohibit Joe from attending the funeral. Sources, of course. Always sources. Always nameless. Always faceless. Always conveniently confirming whatever angle the article needs in that moment. I want to ask a simple question. Which family member said that? Which aunt? Which uncle? Which cousin? Because I have been watching this story from the inside of the inside, and I have not seen a single named family member of Ashley Jana speak to TMZ. Not one. So who is the source? Is it a stranger on the street? Is it a person who happened to walk past the funeral home? Is it the publicist again, recycling himself into different costumes? You decide, because I already have. Now let me bring you to the next layer of this story, because this one is sharp, and this one cuts. Ashley had a close friend and business associate named Savannah Britt. She was not just a casual acquaintance. She was deeply involved in Ashley's professional life. She helped manage Ashley's social media. She helped move pieces in Ashley's career. She is, by every measure, someone who saw the inner workings of Ashley's world up close. And after Joe's so-called love letter dropped, Savannah took to social media and ripped that letter apart with surgical precision. She called it a word salad. She said the family received 0 answers for 11 brutal hours while Joe stayed silent. She said the hotel staff witnessed the fight. She said he had plenty of time to update his profile picture, but no time to explain. She said his statement said nothing about mental health. She said he is not mourning a loss. He is managing a public relations crisis. She said this is not her first rodeo. And then she ended with the line that made everybody who read it stop breathing for a second. She said, "Keep writing your weak script. It's just more evidence for the courts." Let that one sit for a moment. Because if a person who worked alongside Ashley, who knew her routines, who knew her boundaries, who knew her conflicts, who knew her relationships, is publicly saying that out loud, that is not a small thing. That is somebody with information speaking carefully, but speaking pointedly. And whatever you think happened in that hotel room in Tanzania, you cannot dismiss the words of someone who was that close to the orbit of the deceased. Now let me pull on the thread Savannah introduced, because it is one of the most haunting details in this entire saga. The hotel staff. According to multiple reports, Joe and Ashley were in their hotel room arguing for days leading up to the night of the tragedy. Multiple days. Not hours. Days. According to neighboring guests and witness accounts that surfaced early in the story, the arguments were so loud, so intense, so prolonged, that other guests at the hotel went to the front desk to complain. They said it was disturbing. They said they were worried. They said something was clearly wrong. Hotel staff reportedly went to the room and at some point separated the couple. That is not a minor detail. That is not a footnote. That is a documented pattern of conflict in the hours leading up to a young woman never walking out of that room alive again. And if Savannah is hinting that the staff actually witnessed the physical fight itself, not just the noise, not just the yelling, then the story is going to take a turn that no publicist on earth can spin away. We do not know yet what exactly the staff saw. We do not know whether what they witnessed was verbal or physical. We do not know what statements they have given to investigators. But we know they were there. We know they intervened. And we know that no PR letter and no TMZ exclusive can erase a witness who was standing in the doorway. So now let's add it all up. Let's lay it out on the table. Let's look at the chessboard. Piece 1. The fiance does not call the family when the tragedy occurs. The hospital does. Twice. Piece 2. The fiance stays publicly silent for nearly 3 weeks, despite his own future wife being the most talked about name on the internet. Piece 3. The fiance breaks his silence not on the day after she passes, not on the day she comes home, but on the very day of her funeral, with a polished letter that mentions weddings and children, but says nothing about how she actually died. Piece 4. Less than 48 hours after the funeral, a major tabloid publishes an article absolutely dripping with PR fingerprints, repositioning him as the wronged victim of online attacks. Piece 5. The article uses the phrase, "or any other woman," which is the kind of language only legal teams insert into stories. Piece 6. The official cause of her passing has not been changed despite weeks of investigation, witness reports, and physical evidence collection. Piece 7. The hotel staff allegedly witnessed conflict in the hours leading up to her death. Piece 8. The same Tanzanian authorities have, according to reports, returned Joe's passport, meaning he is no longer being detained as a person of interest in any active sense. Now I am going to be very, very careful with the next part, because this is where speculation begins, and I want you, the viewer, to understand that everything I am about to say is my personal theory, my reading of public information, and not a statement of fact. I am not the police. I am not a judge. I am a person paying attention. So treat the next portion of this video as opinion. Treat it as one possible reconstruction of events drawn from public reporting, social media, and witness accounts. Nothing more. Nothing less. Here is what I personally believe may have unfolded in that hotel room. Ashley Jana and Joe McCann were not casually dating. They were not just two people on a vacation. They were living together. They were sharing a home back in the United States. They were closely involved with each other's children, families, and inner circles. When you live with somebody, you do not just learn their favorite foods and their movie preferences. You learn their finances. You learn their secrets. You learn the names they whisper into their phones. You learn the patterns they hide from the rest of the world. And Ashley was not the kind of woman who shrunk herself in a fight. She was not soft-spoken when she was crossed. She was the kind of person who had receipts and was not afraid to show them. So picture this. Picture an argument that has been simmering for days in that hotel room. Picture two people in close quarters with no escape, no friends, no family, no buffer, just each other and the rising heat of accumulated tension. Maybe the argument started over something seemingly small. A message, a photo, a name. Maybe she found something on his phone. Maybe he found something on hers. Maybe the trip was supposed to be a celebration, but had quietly become a confrontation. And in that moment, in that closed room, on a continent thousands of miles from home, maybe Ashley said something she had been holding on to. Maybe she threatened to expose something. Maybe she warned that she would tell the people who write the checks. Maybe she said she would speak to the financial circles he depended on. Maybe she said she would unwind a reputation that took him years to build. And maybe, just maybe, that warning landed in a way that lit a fuse no one was prepared to put out. Again, this is theory. This is one possible read of public information. This is not fact, but it is a theory that aligns with the silence, the delay, the timing, the PR campaign, and the desperate attempt to control a narrative that, by all accounts, is slipping further out of his hands by the day. Because here is the thing that no publicist can spin away. Money does not love you. Money does not visit your grave. Money does not text your mother to ask how she is doing. And money cannot make a story disappear when the public has already decided to pay attention. Joe McCann is, by every report, a man whose entire identity is wrapped up in finance. Crypto, investments, hedge fund relationships, backers with deep pockets. And in that world, your name is your asset. Your reputation is your collateral. The second your name carries the suggestion of scandal, the calls stop coming. The investments dry up. The doors close. So if you want to understand why Joe McCann is suddenly so loud after being so quiet for so long, you do not have to look at his heart. You have to look at his bank account. Because that, in my opinion, is the engine driving every word of that letter and every line of that TMZ article. Not love, not grief, not remembrance. Reputation rehab, image repair, asset protection, and it is going to keep coming. Mark my words. This is not the last article. This is not the last letter. This is wave one. The publicist will check the temperature of public reaction. The lawyer will review the comments. The team will regroup. And then will come wave two. And it will probably be worse. Because the next phase of any reputation campaign like this is not just to redeem the accused. It is to slowly, gently, carefully damage the image of the person who can no longer defend themselves. So I am telling you right now, ahead of time, on the record, do not be surprised if in the coming days you start seeing little drips of negative stories about Ashley. That is the textbook next move. That is the chess play. And when it happens, I want you to remember this video. I want you to remember this warning. I want you to recognize the pattern in real time, because that pattern is older than the internet itself, and it relies on you forgetting that you saw it coming. Now let me speak directly to the family for a moment. Ashley's parents have made a decision that some people online have struggled to understand. They have chosen privacy. They have chosen quiet. They have chosen not to feed the media beast every time it knocks on their door. They have refused to grant interviews. They have refused to perform their grief for the cameras. And listen to me clearly. That is their right. That is their daughter. That is their family. Not yours. Not mine. Not the internet's. People grieve in different ways, and the way Ashley's parents are grieving is dignified, protected, and entirely their own. So if you are out there demanding that they appear on every podcast and every news show, stop. Respect them. They lost a child. There is no script for that. There is no roadmap for that. There is only survival. And every minute they choose to spend offline is a minute they are choosing to remember her on their own terms, not the algorithm's terms. But here is what I am also going to say, and I am going to say it loud enough that it travels. The fact that the family is choosing privacy is exactly the gap that Joe McCann's team is exploiting. They know the parents are not going to fight back in the press. They know the parents are not going to call up TMZ and offer counterquotes. They know the silence of dignity is the perfect canvas for the noise of public relations. And that is why we, the viewers, the followers, the watchers, the people on the internet who actually pay attention, that is why our role here is so important. Because we are the ones who fill the silence. We are the ones who keep her name in front of the algorithm. We are the ones who refuse to let the story die quietly the way these stories always seem to die when wealth gets involved. So if you're watching this, if you have followed Ashley's story, if you ever shared a clip of her, if you ever laughed at one of her videos, if you ever felt that she had a light about her, then you have a job right now. Your job is to refuse to forget. Your job is to keep asking questions. Your job is to keep watching the timeline. Your job is to not be fooled by the next polished article, the next grieving letter, the next surprise sit-down interview. Your job is to remember that a young woman went on a trip with the man she loved and never came home, and the answers to why are still not on the table. Now let me take a moment to dig even deeper into something that has been gnawing at me since the first hour this story broke, and that is the absolute, unshakable importance of the 11-hour gap. 11 hours. Read that number again. 11 hours. From the moment Ashley Jana was reportedly already gone, to the moment her mother received the phone call from a hospital halfway around the world, 11 hours of silence sat between her family and the truth. 11 hours during which a man who claimed to love her could have picked up his phone. 11 hours during which a man who claimed to be her future husband could have dialed any number in his contacts. 11 hours during which any decent person, regardless of grief, regardless of shock, regardless of trauma, would have done the most basic, most human thing imaginable, which is reach out to the family of the woman whose ring he was still holding the receipt for. And in those 11 hours, what did Joe McCann reportedly do? According to the public record we have so far, almost nothing. According to multiple reports, the family did not learn the full picture from him. They learned it from a hospital in another country, in another language, on another continent. And every single time I think about that detail, I am reminded that the most damning evidence in any case like this is not always what was said. Sometimes the loudest evidence is what was never said at all. Silence is data. Silence is information. Silence in those 11 hours says more about what was happening in that hotel room than any TMZ article ever could. And while we are sitting with that detail, let me bring up another one that nobody is talking about loudly enough. The autopsy, the investigation, the witness statements, the hotel surveillance, the phone records, all of it. Every single piece of physical and digital evidence connected to the final hours of Ashley Jana's life is currently sitting inside the jurisdiction of Tanzanian authorities. That means her family does not have direct access to it. Her parents cannot just walk down to a courthouse in their hometown and request the case file. Her friends cannot subpoena hotel surveillance footage. Her followers cannot demand a copy of the phone download. Everything that could possibly answer the question of what truly happened that night is locked behind borders, behind language barriers, behind bureaucracy, behind systems that are not designed to move quickly for grieving families from another country. And anyone who has ever watched these international cases knows the painful truth, which is that time is the enemy of justice in situations exactly like this one. The longer the case sits, the colder the trail gets. The longer the silence stretches, the easier it becomes for the official record to quietly settle into whatever was first written down. And the first thing written down was that this was a self-inflicted incident. So unless someone forces that record to be revisited, unless someone keeps the heat on the investigators, unless the public refuses to allow this case to be filed away and forgotten, That initial classification could very well become the final word on Ashley Jana's life. And that is unacceptable. That is unforgivable. That is precisely why we do not stop talking about her. I also want to address the supporters of Joe McCann who are inevitably going to flood the comment sections of every video about this case in the coming days. You will see them. You can already start to see them. Comments that begin with innocent until proven guilty. Comments that lecture the public on jumping to conclusions. Comments that scold viewers for daring to ask uncomfortable questions about a man who has not been formally charged. And listen, I want to be fair. I want to acknowledge that the principle of innocent until proven guilty is a foundational pillar of any functioning justice system, and I respect that pillar. But here is the thing that the comment section lecturers always seem to conveniently leave out. The principle of innocent until proven guilty applies inside a courtroom. It applies to verdicts. It applies to sentencing. It does not apply to public perception. It does not apply to common sense. It does not apply to the right of a community to look at a pattern of behavior, look at a timeline, look at a series of decisions, and draw their own conclusions about what they are seeing. The public is allowed to ask questions. The public is allowed to notice things. The public is allowed to compare a man's stated grief to his actual behavior and find the gap between the two suspicious. That is not a violation of due process. That is critical thinking. So if you see those lecturing comments rolling in, recognize them for exactly what they are, which is, in many cases, organized noise designed to suppress legitimate questioning. Many of them, I suspect, will be coordinated. Bots, paid commenters, public relations foot soldiers, people with a financial interest in making sure the temperature around Joe McCann stays as low as possible. Do not let them shame you out of asking the questions that matter. And now let me address one more piece of the puzzle that the average viewer might overlook, but that I cannot stop thinking about. The role of the tabloid itself. TMZ, as an institution, has built an empire on insider access. Their entire business model depends on celebrities, lawyers, publicists, and managers feeding them stories. When the most powerful people in the entertainment world need a narrative to drop, where do they go? Not to the New York Times. Not to NPR. Not to a documentary team. They go to TMZ. Because TMZ moves fast. Because TMZ does not always pause to verify. Because TMZ knows how to dress a press release up as breaking news and serve it to millions of people before lunch. We saw this during other scandals. We saw it during other tragedies. We saw the way coverage suddenly tilts when somebody with money walks through the door. So when I tell you that this article reads like a paid placement, I am not making a wild accusation out of thin air. I am telling you that the playbook is decades old, the pattern is well documented, and you are watching it unfold in real time, in front of your face, and your only protection is your own attention. Let me leave you with this thought before we move into the closing. There is a young woman in the ground today who deserved more time. She deserved her wedding. She deserved her babies. She deserved her birthdays. She deserved the slow, ordinary, beautiful life she was building. She deserved a fiance who, on the worst night of her life, picked up the phone and called her mother. She deserved a fiance who, in the days after, paused his career, paused his image, paused his calendar, and dedicated himself to finding answers no matter how uncomfortable they were. She deserved a fiancé who would have spent every dollar he had on private investigators, on translators, on legal experts, on anything and anyone who could have told her parents the truth about what happened in that hotel room. Instead, what we are watching is a man who appears to be spending his money on something else entirely. We are watching a man who, by all public indicators, seems more invested in fixing his own image than in fixing the unanswered questions surrounding his fiancé's final hours. And until that changes, until the silence on her behalf becomes louder than the noise on his behalf, this story is not over. This story is not closing. This story is not going to fade. Not on this channel. Not on my watch. Not while there is breath in our lungs, in a comment section under this video. So before you go, I need you to do 3 small things for me. 3 things that will not cost you a single dollar, but mean absolutely everything to a story that powerful people are working very hard to bury. First, drop your honest thoughts in the comments below. Tell me what jumped out at you. Tell me which line of that tabloid article made your skin crawl. Tell me what you believe really happened in that hotel room in Tanzania. Tell me whether you buy a single syllable of that polished letter or whether you can see straight through the surface to the panic underneath. Your voice matters. Your comment matters. Every reply you leave is part of the public record, part of the pressure, part of the reason this case has not yet been quietly filed away. Second, tap that like button. I know every channel asks for it. I know it sounds like background noise. But on this story, on this woman, on this case, every single tap is a vote that says her name deserves to keep traveling. The platform does not care about justice. The platform only cares about momentum. So give it momentum. Push this video into one more feed, one more recommendation, one more set of eyes that have not yet heard her name spoken out loud. Third, subscribe to this channel and turn that notification bell all the way on. Because there will be a wave 2. There will be a wave 3. There will be more leaked photographs, more sympathetic profiles, more carefully timed exclusives, more soft features designed to gently reshape the public's memory of the man at the center of this storm. And when those waves break, you're going to want a place that takes the language apart line by line, sentence by sentence, comma by comma, the same way we took it apart together today. That is the work this channel exists to do. A young woman trusted a man with her future. A young woman boarded a plane with him and never boarded one home. A young woman accepted a ring on a Tanzanian beach, and the next message her family ever received about her came from a hospital. Ashley Jana deserves answers. Her mother deserves answers. Her father deserves answers. Her friends deserve answers. Savannah deserves answers. Every person who ever loved her deserves answers. And no amount of money, no amount of polished letters, no amount of carefully timed exclusives, no amount of unnamed sources whispering into the ear of a tabloid editor, no amount of crisis management, no amount of strategic silence, no amount of branded grief is going to make the rest of us forget the question that started this entire conversation. What truly happened to Ashley Jana? Until that question has a real, honest, evidence-backed answer, we are not going anywhere. We are not blinking. We are not closing the tab. We are not letting this story slip quietly into the archive of forgotten women. Her name is Ashley Jana. Say it tonight. Say it tomorrow morning when you wake up. Say it next week. Say it next month, next year, every single time her case is mentioned, every single time her face appears on your timeline, every single time anyone tries to change the subject. Because the louder her name stays in this world, the harder it becomes for her story to be buried beside her body. I will see you in the next breakdown. Stay sharp. Stay loud. Stay watching. Stay relentless. Stay curious. Stay unwilling to be quietly lied to. Stay the kind of viewer who counts the words, watches the dates, traces the timing, and refuses to swallow a press release dressed up as a tragedy. Stay the kind of person who remembers the names of the women that powerful men work very hard for the rest of the world to forget. Justice for Ashley Jana.